So good morning, everyone. Please take your seat. We are about to begin. So my name is Benoît Jaspard. I'm the new president of the administrative board since July this year. I'm active in EFRAG since, to give you an idea, since 2002, so a lot of time. I'm very honored to welcome you today. It's a nice group. I understand we will be about 350 here in Brussels and more than 1,500 online outside. So this means this shows the interest and it underscores the importance of your work. Thank you for being there. I would start by expressing my gratitude to my predecessor, Hans Boyce. I don't know if he's here. Let's say he has navigated EFRAG during 2 years, and I think he did that very well. It was a significant period of growth and development. A few words about EFRAG itself. As you probably know, in the last 2-3 years, EFRAG has grown rapidly as a result of its expanded mission with a new pillar. We have now, and you know that very well, 2 pillars. We had the only one in the past. As since the Gauzès reform, we have added the sustainability reporting. It has extended our governance. It has extended our membership and also our staff based. At the end of last year, we had about 55 employees. We have now about 70 plus a certain number, I think 19 interns helping us. You must know that's important that in addition, EFRAG has a network of about, it's even more than 300 experts working in the different board, techs, subgroups, and panels, and nearly always in kind. So these 300 people are something quite unique, and I would say the hardcore of what we are doing. You know that in the financial reporting pillar, our main focus is to try to influence the IFRS standards from the European perspective and to provide endorsement advice to the European Commission. In the sustainability reporting pillar, EFRAG has let's call that a broader mission. We prepare draft ESRS under the CSRD and provide implementation support to ESRS. Also, in this case, is technical advisor of the European Commission. The 2 pillars are quite different, for sure. But it's clear that the know-how we have has been developed over the years, more than 20 years, in the financial reporting pillar. That's where we have developed our way of working. That's where we have developed our network, and this network is for sure something very powerful. We work under a certain number of principles. These principles are important. They are also sometimes challenging, for sure. At the heart of our mission, that's as you know, that's the European public interest. That's what we try to follow. We do that through a multi-stakeholder approach. We have all kinds of people around the table, and we try to agree together, and that's not always easy, but in most of the times we manage that. The consensus is at the center of our mission. We respect a strong due process. The due process is something is never finished. We always try to improve that, and it's very important. The organization also tries to be inclusive. We are very careful about nationality, very careful about gender balance. Not always easy to get there, but we try to include all kind of let's say people in the organization, knowing that the center still of the way we recruit the people is the competence, the talent. We try to get good people, ideally the best people in the organization. You have seen the title of today, Advancing Transparency and Competitiveness in Challenging Times. I don't need to tell you that the times are very challenging. You open the newspaper, 2 wars at the same time in Ukraine and in the Middle East. Economic instability, a lot of uncertainties in Europe and also in the US and in the rest of the world. Climate urgency, forest fires, exceptional flooding in many places. So the times are very difficult and challenging. I would like, and that's a key message, to tell you that EFRAG is not living in a bubble far away from the reality. We also understand the challenge for the, let's say, for many of the first-time appliers, and we are very conscious of the situation. In this context, 3 weeks ago, the chairman of the Sustainability Reporting Board and myself has sent a letter in our personal capacity to Sean Berrigan to ask, because we are advisor of the European Commission, we have asked to get clarity as far as it's possible about the situation, while being completely conscious of the context of the European Commission. But we have asked for clarity. We hope to get that, because at the time being, it's not easy even to prepare a budget for the year 2025. The new commission is in place. We hope to get feedback soon. In this letter, we have also, and I'm sure that Patrick de Corbeau will develop that later today, ways to help to keep moving. We have suggested, following the Draghi report, to take this new category mid-cap very seriously. I think this would be a way to reduce the burden on undertakings. We have also some good ideas, we believe, about sector-specific standards. They are perceived by many undertakings as too much and too early. At the time they fight to finalize the set one. So we are not living in a bubble. So you have seen the agenda for today. We'll start with an overview of the situation, high-level perspective of Mr. Marta Merla and Mr. Jean-Paul Servet. That's the first part. After that, we'll dedicate the morning to the financial reporting pillar, with a last session just before lunch, where we will start to address sustainability reporting. So we have a full program. I hope it will be interesting. I hope it will be, and I'm sure it will be, insightful. So let me perhaps now introduce Mr. Marta Merla. Mr. Marta Merla is Director for Financial Markets in DG FISMA. I would say that he's the main representative of DG FISMA in ESMA Board of Supervisors. It's a fair summary of what you do. Please, Mr. Merla.
Thank you, Mr. Jaspar, for this introduction. It's a pleasure to stand before you today and address the efforts that EFRAG has made regarding European corporate reporting. EFRAG plays a major role in helping us shaping the landscape of financial and sustainability reporting in the EU with a strong commitment to fostering transparency, accountability, and sustainability in the corporate world. EFRAG has been at the forefront of today's ever-evolving business environment, listening to industry experiences, and working to ensure that reporting standards are not only robust, but also adapted to market and company needs. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to EFRAG for its tremendous work in its traditional business, namely financial reporting. Nowadays, the importance of sound financial reporting could be forgotten with the amount of attention given to sustainability reporting. Financial reporting will continue to be the bedrock for efficient functioning capital markets. Moreover, financial transparency is key for maintaining trust, and therefore it is a necessary condition for financial stability. As advisors to the Commission on IFRSs, and thanks to the funding from the EU and EFRAG member organizations, EFRAG will continue to play a major role in financial reporting. Over the years, EFRAG has built up a very trustworthy international reputation. As a result, EFRAG has a major influence on global financial reporting standard setting. The combined EU accounting expertise of EFRAG members under the chairmanship of Wolf Klinz and Sebastian Harushimana, respectively, contributes to the quality of our IFRS accounting standards and represents the EU stakeholder perspective in the global debate. In comparison to 2023, this year has been again very busy in terms of endorsement advice, especially as the ISB has issued 2 new IFRS accounting standards and some amendments to the existing IFRS accounting standards. The 2 new IFRS accounting standards are IFRS 18 and IFRS 19. The Commission is already preparing for 2 further endorsement recommendations next year. Looking ahead to next year, EFRAG will continue to be active in endorsement advice as the ISB plans to issue another new IFRS accounting standard regarding rate-regulated activities in the second half of 2025, which will replace the interim IFRS 14 on regulatory deferral accounts. There will also be amendments to existing accounting standards, which will entail further endorsement work. Furthermore, EFRAG will have to submit a comment letter on the planned ISB exposure draft regarding dynamic risk management. This topic has a direct impact on European stakeholders as the continuation of the use of IRS 39 on macro hedging is also linked to the use of the famous carve-out. And the Commission would therefore very much welcome it if the project succeeded and the carve-out could be abolished after 20 years. Secondly, I would like to express my gratitude to EFRAG for their exceptional work on the European sustainability reporting standards. Despite working under short deadlines and sometimes significant pressure, EFRAG has consistently risen to the challenge. Bringing together multi-stakeholder perspectives in a balanced and coherent way is not easy, and this was achieved most of the time. The adoption of the first set of ESRS last year was an important moment, with EFRAG being central to that process, as the European Commission's technical advisor on sustainability reporting standards. At the same time, we understand that the ESRS represent a challenge for many companies, particularly first-time reporters who do not have experience in sustainability reporting, and for smaller companies who have less resources to invest in this. We have seen in recent times the need to focus on and foster European competitiveness and resilience in an ever-changing global environment. The ESRS are a key milestone in increasing the transparency and sustainability of European companies, but we also need to ensure that sustainability can be a vector for value creation and competitiveness when operating globally. Our recent focus has been on helping companies implement and apply these new standards and making sure that they become a success. The Commission and EFRAG are undertaking a number of actions to support this. Before looking at the challenges of implementation, let's remember why the EU approved these new rules in the first place. Better sustainability reporting is a necessary part of the European Green Deal and of our approach to sustainable finance in particular. We need more investors to channel more financing to companies that help to address the sustainability crisis rather than exacerbating it. That can only happen with better information about companies' impacts on people and on the environment. Better sustainability reporting will also reduce the risks of financial instability. The aggregation of multiple investments made without due regard to risks arising from issues such as climate change and biodiversity collapse could have systemic consequences. It is therefore paramount that companies are transparent about their sustainability-related financial risks. And the new rules should, in the medium and long term, benefit companies themselves. Mandatory common standards should substantially reduce the burden that comes from having to apply multiple, inconsistent, and overlapping voluntary standards. Standardization is ultimately about simplification. The discipline of sustainability reporting should help companies to better manage their own sustainability performance and risks. It will provide analysis and data that boards can use internally to decide on investments and to shape company strategy. Having said all that, we are aware of the challenge for companies of reporting against the new standards, especially for the first one or two reporting cycles. It requires doing things differently. It implies new systems, new skills, new people, and we recognize that there are inevitably costs and some uncertainties as everyone becomes familiar with the new rules. That is why we have taken various measures to facilitate implementation. We have asked EFRAG to prioritize the development of additional implementation guidance for companies. EFRAG has delivered on that front and has also established an online platform for technical answers to technical questions about the standards. In August, the Commission published a Q&A document that clarifies many legal questions on the new reporting framework, which has now been translated into all EU official languages. We have launched a flagship technical support instrument on sustainability reporting. This will provide technical assistance to member states so that they can give additional support and guidance to companies at national level. We have postponed by 2 years the deadline for the first set of sector standards, with the intention of first giving companies more time to get familiar with and to implement the existing sector agnostic standards. We have raised the monetary thresholds used to define large companies under the accounting directive, This has had the effect of reducing the number of companies subject to the new rules by about 14%. And we have helped EFRAG and the ISSB to agree joint interoperability guidance on how ESRS and global standards work together. The guidance shows a company reporting according to European standards can also comply with ISSB standards with minimal additional efforts. We have asked EFRAG to prepare a simple standard for voluntary use by non-listed SMEs alongside the standard for listed SMEs that is required by law. The voluntary SME standard should play a critical role in helping European SMEs to respond to requests for sustainability information from banks, large companies, and other stakeholders. It should facilitate their access to finance and their participation in the transition to a sustainable economy. We acknowledge the need to support companies in a pragmatic and proportionate approach to the implementation of the sustainability reporting framework. In the summer, Commissioner McGuinness wrote to member states asking them to help ensure that the CSRD and ESRS are applied in a proportionate way. Indeed, this is probably my single most important message today. We should all apply the new rules with pragmatism and common sense. Let's avoid the risk of over-implementation and reporting more information than what is required. ESRS do not require reporting to the 9th degree of granularity, nor do they require reporting about each and every supplier in the value chain. Rather, they require companies to make decisions about what information is relevant and useful to report. The ESRS contain many phase-in provisions, including on value chain reporting. They should be used. There are therefore a reason to reduce the initial challenge of applying the standards, and there is no stigma attached to using the phasing provisions. We should acknowledge that reporting will also improve over time and probably quite quickly as data quality and availability gets better and as companies gain experience. So we need this message to be heard by companies, by enforcement authorities, and by auditors and assurers. Looking at the upcoming political cycle and without prejudging exactly what the new Commission will do, there will be clearly an emphasis on competitiveness and reducing regulatory burden on businesses. I know you are aware of President von der Leyen's remarks about a so-called omnibus addressing the CSRD, the taxonomy regulation, and the CSDDD. We understand that you have questions about the exact plans of the incoming Commission in that regard. And we, of course, understand that companies and other stakeholders need clarity as soon as possible. At the same time, you will understand that only the incoming College of Commissioners will be able to give precise answers to those questions. We therefore ask for your patience while the new college decides exactly how it wishes to move forward. The new college started effectively only last week. Now, we strongly value the discussion with you on all these issues. It is through dialogue and understanding that we can collectively find the right balance between reporting obligations and sustainable management for companies. When we consider how to help companies to implement the framework, we can see that digitalization is becoming crucial in every aspect of companies' life. Digital tools and solutions to facilitate the sharing, collection, and disclosure of sustainability information can help companies to begin the sustainability journey. The digital reporting of companies' financial and sustainability information will allow investors and others to compare more easily the information published by companies. The CSRD requires companies to publish sustainability information using a digital format and to tag the information using a digital classification system. EFRAG finalized the development of the draft XBRL digital taxonomy and submitted it to ESMA in August. ESMA will use this classification system for its draft technical standards, which will then be published by the Commission via a delegated act. Companies will not have to digitally tag their sustainability information until that delegated act becomes applicable. As regards the accessibility of digital reporting, the European Single Access Point will go live by mid-2027. This means that starting from 2027, users will be able to access all companies' public financial and sustainability information from a single platform. Finally, EFRAG needs adequate financial resources to do everything that it is expected to do. The Commission has increased its financial contribution to EFRAG by 75% over the last 2 years. We have also agreed to finance up to 90% of EFRAG's costs for its work on sustainability reporting. In addition, further to a European Parliament proposal, we have agreed a pilot project for EFRAG on the implementation of ESRS of approximately 3 million euros for next year. I am glad to hear that EFRAG has immediately started taking the necessary measures to make use of the funding and work on the initial steps for the deliverables under the pilot project, which will include the swift recruitment of new expert staff. We need to continue an open and honest dialogue on the question of resources, taking account of the EU's tight budgetary situation, the financial contributions of EFRAG members, and efficient use by EFRAG of all allocated EU funds. In closing, I want to express my thanks once again to EFRAG for its efforts in both financial and sustainability reporting. In a changing geopolitical landscape where there is increased emphasis on European competitiveness and resilience, we need to facilitate and simplify the lives of companies while ensuring that our sustainability and transparency objectives are achieved. So thank you once again for your commitment, and thank you very much for your attention.
So Mr. Servet will arrive in 1 minute. I can already introduce him. So based on the information I have, so it's very impressive. Mr. Servet is chairman of the IOSCO board. He's also chairman of the IOSCO European Regional Committee, chair of the IFRS Foundation monitoring board, and he's chairman of the Belgian Financial Services and Market Authority. So I don't know, I understand he's in the building. So he's a star, he's a star. Yeah, he's there. So, Mr. Servet, we have already introduced your person. You will give us the second high-level perspective. We just had the high-level perspective of Mr. Martin Merla. Give us, please, your view from the corporate reporting developments, regulatory perspective. Please. Thank you.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to address such an audience, especially in a city that I know very well because I'm native from here, not far from here. Cher Patrick, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Chair, it's a real pleasure and a privilege for me to stand before such a broad and diverse audience today. Congratulations, correct me, more than 1,600 persons, either here or online. Congratulations. I would say I start my career as national standards setter. Andreas knows that very well. If I would have expected to have so many people in a room about financial reporting and accounting standard, even at the time of the switch to the euro. So it means that what we are discussing, ladies and gentlemen, is important for many people. And it's also the case in my capacity as IOSCO chair. And that's the reason, ladies and gentlemen, why I would like to focus my remarks on the aspect that, from our international perspective, are crucial for the development of corporate sustainability reporting globally, as rightly stressed by you, Chair. In this context, is it a surprise, Wolf, if I'm telling that I am convinced that the sustainability reporting framework is best served by a proportionate and gradual approach at the global, EU, and national level. And I'm not telling that because I know that there are many people from the industry, many preparers, issuers, auditors would like to hear that. But that's sincerely what I think since day one, since the first day of my own journey about sustainable finance. And at the same time, if I may, we must strive for appropriate alignment at this level, and IOSCO is instrumental in achieving this. I'm not saying that IOSCO must be in the picture on the stage for everything, but whenever you have to deal with global challenges, risk and opportunity, IOSCO can be useful because just for information, I'm not sure that everybody knows that, and it's not a problem. IOSCO, it means 130 jurisdiction, and it means, because we are a global membership organization, that all members, means financial supervisor, members of ESMA in the EU, are involved in the various capacity in the supervision of 95% of all the financial markets all around the world. And we have also a majority of government market, which is, I think, a real added value when we speak about many aspects relating to sustainable finance. Let us start, if I may, ladies and gentlemen, with proportionality and alignment, of course, as guiding principle. This is not necessarily something new. When I had the pleasure to be selected 30 years ago as junior staff of the Banking Commission at the time, or the FSMA, the first word I heard when I arrived in the premises was proportionality as financial supervisor. So there is nothing new. There is, I would say, not necessarily something that many people in this room, and I speak on the color I see of Afrenta, the CEO of EFRAG, is something that every auditor knows by heart. And it's clear that everybody it is clear to everybody, sorry, that delivering sustainability disclosure is a challenge for companies, especially for the smaller companies in scope and tools that have not previously reported sustainability information. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, your concern and my concern. I have the pleasure not only to be the chair of IOSCO, but also to chair the Belgium FSMA, which is the UK FCA of the Dutch IFM of the French IMF, so in the Twin Peak models. So it means 400 people. 75% of them have one of two professional degrees. And I asked to my staff, could you compute what it means the sustainability journey as proposed, required by the EU co-legislator? Not only, I would say, reporting standards in compliance with ESRS/ISSB standards, but also ESG preference, green bonds, a rule of conduct, etc., taxonomy, and so on. How much? Hopefully, it's a shame we don't have the capacity to have 400 people, it means 20 people, 5%. So I know that this experience can be time-consuming for you. I know that it can be costly because it's also a challenge for me. It doesn't mean that we must push back. At the contrary, because it's a common journey, but it's fair to say that it's also especially the case for the smaller company in scope and tools that have not previously reported sustainability information, because that's a new world for everybody, let us be clear. And the danger would be to think that we can be perfect in one day. We have to discover a lot of new aspects. We know what it means about quality and quantity of data, and implementation step by step of ESRS standard will be, of course, very useful for that. But at the same time, may I just stress the following, is that the collective memory is very weak, dear Patrick. When I start to speak about sustainable finance, my first word was to say, we have a problem, is that we ask from John and Mary in the street, the retail investor, to use an alphabet soup of voluntary disclosure framework. And I think that 80% of all the people in this room would have said, doesn't work. How can we ask that for a fellow citizen? We need to have one framework at EU level and one framework at international level. Because too many frameworks, an alphabet soup of voluntary disclosure framework, and I belong to the school of supervisors who don't have any problem with self-regulation. We can use self-regulation as long as it works, and if it doesn't work anymore, we have to switch to something else. That's the classical rule, if I may say. But that was the situation not 20 years ago, not 10 years ago, just 4 years ago. And I'm always recalling that because the memory, look, about the COVID crisis is always very weak, as we know. So it means that what we are now doing together is a giant step going in the right direction, because before it was a complex and hence costly situation for companies seeking to provide information while leaving investors totally unable to compare the performance and prospect of company. The challenge posed by reporting is a massive undertaking for many reasons. Developing the necessary expertise. The case for you, for me, for everybody. I am learning every day, let us be clear. Accessing, analyzing the data, making the right interpretation of the standards, and of course, conducting robust material assessment are challenges that require resources and commitment. In this regard, I have to pay tribute to the European Commission and EFRAG, because the European Commission and EFRAG have taken meaningful and concrete measures to reduce the immediate burden on companies by raising the applicable scoping threshold, by allowing transition period, and by delaying sectoral standards, and I will come back on sectoral standards in a few minutes. For proportionality, which goes hand in hand with implementation guidance, is key to ensuring that the standards also work on the ground and not only on paper. The implementation guidance on various topics, as well as the many, I would say many is understatement, Q&As EFRAG has been working on, are therefore very welcome, as they give necessary clarification on important interpretation questions. Patrick and Saskia, correct me, but if I'm not mistaken, but I believe that EFRAG has received almost 700 questions. When Patrick told me that some months ago, I have to tell you, Patrick, I was not sure that I would say you will be able to answer to this question. Then I have the pleasure to invite Patrick for a training for my staff in Belgium, not far from here. And I saw one slide with the answer, the classification in different aspects. That's great, frankly speaking, because I know that many people in this room are expecting, and it means also give also an indication of the importance of EFRAG classification effort. That's very positive. If I may, from a more wishy-washy point of view, it means by definition, if there are so many questions, that not everything is clear. And it's normal, let us be clear. In many aspects of the financial regulation, that's the reason why we have level 2, level 3, if necessary. But it means also that we need to take that on board in our assessment about the progressive increase of the quality of the reporting about that. Such guidance also contribute to a common understanding of the standards and their intricacies throughout the whole sustainability reporting ecosystem. And I know many of you will be looking at this through the eyes of the issuer, but one should not forget, if I may, that the starting point of all the journey, it's about you, ladies and gentlemen, if you are also a private investor, what I'm used to calling John and Mary in the street. We would like to use one standard, one framework, and it's also the case for Asians provider and regulator. Implementation effort should be further prioritized in the EU as well as beyond. And as is often said, sustainability reporting, it's a journey. At IOSCO, we are particularly attentive to this issue. And what does it mean? It means that teaming up with the ISSB, we are also dedicating resources for a capacity building program and training with a focus on grow and emerging market. This is absolutely necessary to promote consistent adoption of sustainability standards across continents. We don't have to underestimate what it means, the learning curve for everybody. At the same time, I have to tell you that I'm very happy and even proud, if I may say, sorry if it looks a little bit too, I'm going to apologize for that. But when I see what happens in a minimum of time at EU level, at international level, and as far as I'm concerned as IOSCO chair, I was elected at the end of 2022. I told the audience, more or less the same time as when I was elected, we will be able to endorse ISSB standards in less than 1 year. Not sure that everybody was convinced it's a new chair, it's normal. He tried to have some element of language. But I was very happy to see that in less than 1 year, we were able to endorse. Endorse doesn't mean, ladies and gentlemen, to put a stamp. We challenge a lot. ISSB had to change different time about scope 3, proportionality as well, SME outside of the scope, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, in July 2023, we were able to endorse, which means for a call for action, and it means a call upon jurisdiction to adopt, apply, or otherwise be informed by the ISSB standards. After that, the next step was to say, okay, let us speak, let us try to be helpful for the sake of implementation. And IOSCO endorsement or implementation efforts and our capacity building program training have contributed to 30 jurisdictions, I repeat, in less than 1 year, because we are, correct me, in December 2024, 30 jurisdictions, which means in fact 56, because EU count as one. So more or less 60 jurisdictions are now switching with ISSB standards, fully interbundled with ESRS standards. Who are expected that in the room? Frankly speaking, not me. And I think that you can feel that I'm a little bit passionate and a doer. And it's also the case, not only in Europe. Please don't think that EU is the only one who try to regulate. Please, even if we have the reflex to try to think that we have to regulate everything, I would say, Mario Draghi report. in Asia, can you imagine that Japan, Hong Kong, Main China, Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, they are all going in the same direction, ISSB standards, interoperability with ESRS standards. And that's the reason why I would say when I had the pleasure to announce that we endorse, I came with another statistic by saying that at the end of the day, I personally believe that 130,000 companies will use more or less the same language. Of course, there will be carve in, carve out. Of course, the speed and the size of the train won't be the same on all continent junctions. But the train starts on time, which is not necessarily the message that you can expect when you have the pleasure to be involved in various COP events. And if I may say, what does it mean, I would say, the 56 jurisdiction? And I have to tell you that you don't intend to organize a new conference just before the end of this year. Before the end of the year, I think that I will have the pleasure to announce that we are far beyond that, even more than 60. So in this increasing virtuous circle. And what does it mean, 56 jurisdiction? It means, ladies and gentlemen, that almost 57% of global GDP and over 50% of the global green gas emission are involved in the switch of ISSB/ESRS standards. I repeat, 57% of global GDP, 40% of the global market cap, all around the world, all continents including. And last but not least, which is, I think, frankly speaking, for me, a good surprise, almost all those 30 jurisdictions, almost all these 30 jurisdictions see value in progressing with Scope 3 greenhouse gas emission disclosure requirement. Where is the debate about Scope 3? Of course, we have a lot of safe harbor, proportionality aspect, transitional periods. And it means, in fact, that my so-called Belgium statistic, I'm not convinced that all Belgium statistics are convincing from time to time, so I'm rather objective for that. But it means that IOSCO is on track to reach its objective of 130,000 companies eventually using ISSB aligned disclosure. And this includes, of course, may I repeat that, the AU27 through the ESRS standard. So we should seek ways to minimize duplicative reporting for global firms as much as possible. That's the reason, ladies and gentlemen, why IOSCO strongly supports the step taken by EFRAG and the ISSB to reduce complexity, fragmentation, and duplication for companies, applying both the ISSB standards and ESRS. Who had expected in this room that EFRAG and ISSB IFRS Foundation would be able to publish a kind of Belgium compromise about interoperability? Sincerely, we can vote again, but okay. Some people would say 1 page, and other, I don't know why, 100 pages. We are, correct me, 63 pages, if I'm not wrong. It's a good compromise, I would say. And it means also that this publication of this very important, I would say, interoperability table also supports the interoperability between ESRS and ISSB standard and drastically reduces the risk of double reporting. And this milestone underscores again, if I may, the importance of aligning global and regional sustainability reporting frameworks. This alignment reduces fragmentation and supports a unified language for sustainability disclosure. Allow me now to switch to the sectoral standards, which is, I think, it's not a surprise, my main message today. Patrick, if I may say, entre la poire et le dessert. So it means the right moment to give some aspect about that, comment about that touchy aspect. But touchy doesn't mean that there is no solution. At the contrary. And we need to address this topical issue. Why? Just because in the same spirit, effort to develop sectoral standards must support the same principles of interoperability, proportionality, and inclusivity. Ongoing dialogue between regional and global stakeholders is essential, and I know that it's the case. Let us be clear. And it is to be welcome that in developing the sector-specific disclosure, EFRAG aim expressis verbis to leverage as far as possible existing frameworks like SASB and those from GRI. But if I may say, there is a huge difference with what happened 3 years ago. Why do I dare say? Because we should seek ways to achieve, where possible, a high degree to alignment between frameworks. Let us be clear. We are speaking most of the time about sustainability reporting of global player. Sustainability reporting is the reason why IOSCO is in the that we don't know what it means borders for that. And when we speak about sectoral standards, in particular, by definition, there are no borders because the objective is to give the capacity to have benchmarks, to see where you are. Are you in line with the benchmark with your peers? Are you in line with your own journey? So by definition, there are no borders, I would say. That's very important to say. But if I may, this time is different. Because unlike the launch of the first wave of standard, where the EU rightly took the leads first as part of its Green Deal, you need to have pioneer in a journey, and that was the case. And thanks to the EU co-legislator. But unlike the launch of the first wave, this time both standard setters are starting work on sectoral standard in parallel. In parallel, providing an opportunity for alignment from the outset. That was not the case 3 years ago. What does it mean? It means that as standard setters advance in their consideration of sectoral standards, my view, my personal view, but my strong view, is that we should seek convergence from the outset. Stakeholders, including issuers, investors, preparers, auditors, all of them appreciate the alignment achieved between ISSB standards and ESRS and are eager to see comparable alignment extended to sectoral standards. It would be curious that we didn't start at the same time, then we were able to join, and then we would restart with two different approaches. Nobody would be able to understand and to accept that. So for once, I am not calling for speed. I'm not calling for speed. I would say the moment is in the EU, especially for the implementation of the current standard, but I would call for thorough consultation in order to have an alignment between the different sectoral standards at regional level and at international level. If I may, and I would say in a nutshell, because time flies, some comment about transition plan disclosure before switching to the conclusion and about audit and ethics. I had the pleasure, as IOSCO chair, again, of attending a COP even. It was the case in Baku for the COP29. And for me, a COP is always, there are pros and cons for COP, but it's also a fantastic opportunity for all regulators to explain what we have been able to do. I would say accountability is part of our mission statement. And that's the reason why I had the pleasure during the COP29 to present the new IOSCO report on transition plan disclosure. And as you will all know, climate transition plans are increasingly being used by companies. But at the same time, I am the first one to say, first thing first. First, having the capacity to use the same language. So it means more data, better quality. It means capacity to extract more data, to enhance the level of quality to giant database, a la NZDPU, Macron/Bloomberg. Then to think about, I would say, more quality for scope 3. And at the end of the day, transition plan. And again, I would say the danger, the objective is to avoid an alphabet soup. And that's the reason why IOSCO decided to release this report, because if we want to have a positive effect on market participant, ability to make informed decision, it means that transition plan disclosure need to be comparable, consistent, and real. And the IOSCO report, just published 5 weeks ago, seeks to avoid ending up with an alphabet soup of transition plan disclosure where they are being published. IOSCO, therefore, stresses the ongoing need for interoperability as well as the development of transition plan disclosure guidance to clarify disclosure expectation and lead to more standardized information. And last but not least, some comment about you. because I presume that many of you are also auditors. And to accept to be challenged by external auditor, it means trust and disclosure about sustainability aspect. It means trust, it means audit and ethics. And that's the reason why, to contribute to the trustworthiness and therefore the usefulness of this disclosure, IOSCO encouraged the global development of Asians and ethical standards that are focused on the public interest, framework agnostic, and covering all sustainability Asians provide. That's the reason why we recently assessed the standards approved by the International Audit Standards Setter, ISSB, encouraging jurisdiction to make use of the standards while taking into account national arrangement. IOSCO will also soon assess the ESBA ethical standards in the same way as the Asian standards. With these standards in place, the ecosystem of international standards will be complete in early 2025. I forgot to tell you that when in my speech, when I was elected chair, I say, look, we need to be back to the market participant at the end of 2024. So we are the 10th of December with a fully fledged toolkit. Not sure that everybody was convinced that was not to accept, but here we are. The loop is closed. Everything is on the table. Let us try together to implement. It won't be easy. There will be challenges, but we were able to ensure that the train start on time. Thank you for attention.
So we have now, let's say, 25 minutes coffee break. Try to be back here at 20 to 11. Thank you. very long career. He's been a EU Parliament member. He's been during many years a partner at McKinsey in the UK, in France, and in Germany. Participated to the privatization of the former East German, let's say, apparatus in Treuhand. Wolf Klins, please.
Thank you very much, Benoit, for introducing me. From my side, also a very hearty welcome to all of you. I'm delighted to see so many attending our conference in person, and I do know that a few hundred apparently also follow us virtually. So the interest is there, and what is also very comforting is the fact that to see so many females and women in this room, this is not necessarily always the case. Yesterday, I learned something, that whether there is real interest by the people that attend a conference can only be measured if you charge a fee. So today, this conference is still free of any fee, but we may consider, if our financial situation does not really massively improve, maybe next year you get an invitation and registering will cost you a few bucks. Anyhow. EFRAG has established itself over the last 2 years as the European voice of corporate reporting. That's what we call it. It started a bit more than 22 years ago, as you may know, as the Financial Reporting Advisory Group, as the name EFRAG says, as a matter of fact, to the EC. But more than 2.5 years ago, we did add, as has been mentioned already, a second pillar to the structure of EFRAG, namely sustainability reporting. And now financial reporting and sustainability reporting together enable us to call of EFRAG as the voice of corporate reporting. The mission of EFRAG, however, has not really changed. It still is the same, namely to help establish global reporting standards while at the same time defending European interests. Working for the European public good means adapting the proposals that we get from the ISP or in the sector of sustainability reporting to the European needs and developing and injecting new ideas into those bodies. Challenging times require adapting the focus of EFRAG's work in the future. And I will talk about this at the end of my short presentation, but you know what I'm alluding to, the new priorities, possibly new priorities and policy changes of the US administration, and also the new risks in the capital markets, given the high public debt that we have in many European countries. Now, I want to attract your attention to 3 objectives of EFRAG. The first is that we want to make financial reporting better. The second is we do want to improve transparency and send this message to the capital markets. And the third one is we want to pave the way to bring financial reporting and sustainability reporting closer together. The first, making financial reporting better. To achieve this, we reach out to our constituents and stakeholders and try to get as much feedback as we possibly can, which we can then feed into the ISB in the process of developing new or amending existing standards. And I may give you a few examples of this. This is one of our traditional work, of course. We have, and sometimes we do this ahead of the ISB, we have published discussion papers, for instance, on intangibles, and also developed a statement of cash flows ahead of the ISB's own project in these 2 areas. We have massively contributed to the development of primary financial statements which led to the development of the IFRS 18 that provides better information for users, including a newly defined operating profit, and also disclosures on management performance measures. And also, we do know that companies are always trying to sort of compare or make a cost-benefit analysis when they are asked to introduce a new standard or an amended standard. And we understand that this cost-benefit analysis should come out positive. And therefore, we are quite glad to see that the IFRS 19, or the subsidiaries without public accountability, does lead to a reduction of burden and does enable companies to reduce reporting costs. So this is making financial reporting better, improving transparency. We pride ourselves to have a high legitimacy in the market. And that legitimacy is built on professional excellence, good governance, solid due process, public accountability, thought leadership, and transparency. And as a matter of fact, all our meetings, board meetings, whether it's the Financial Reporting Board or the Financial Reporting Tech Board, they are all open to the public. They're always, you have access to these board meetings whenever you like. And also give you some examples of that transparency aspect. For instance, the management performance disclosures that have been or are being introduced in the IFRS 18 are an example of how the accounting standards bring more transparency to the capital markets. Also, when we talk about financial instruments with characteristics of equity, so-called FICE project, or the business combinations, disclosures, and goodwill impairment project, there are also examples of how, through those standards, more transparency can be created and fed into the markets. We have, starting from, and maybe I should mention this, you know that basically we work in three ways. We react to proposals that come to us from the ISP, for instance. We then also develop our own ideas on our research work. And thirdly, of course, we work with the Commission on endorsing these new or amended standards. Now, we have, based on our research work, also developed a discussion paper on cash flow reporting. This project has been presented in spring already to the European Accounting Association in their spring conference in Bucharest. It has been presented to IFAS in London in September. And the discussion paper now has formally been reported in November of last month, as a matter of fact. And that is also an example of how we feel the transparency can be improved. And the third project is that we try to pave the way to bring financial reporting and sustainable reporting closer together. In order to do this, we have started a project in early this year, so-called connectivity project. That is a project that is being carried out in the remit of the financial reporting pillar, but it's clear that in order to produce any meaningful result, we have to work closely with the sustainability pillar. And that's what the project manager also does. We are supported in this work by the Connectivity Advisory Panel, a panel that is being managed by Jens Berger, who used to be the acting financial tech reporting tech chair. This Connectivity Advisory Board consists of some 20 people, highly competent people, and they have, amongst other things, helped us to contribute to the ISP's initiative on illustrative examples, creating or developing or detecting rather illustrative examples on climate-related and other uncertainties in financial statements. Now, this connectivity report, an interim report has been published towards the end of Q2 in June this year. A presentation of these ideas that you find in the connectivity report have been presented already in March to ESMA Climate Conference, to IFAS in April, in Italy to the National Standard Setters Conference in October, and then in Oslo and Stockholm just last month. So the reception has been quite favorable, and we hope to be able to come up with a final paper in the first half of next year. We have, in order to help also the European Green Deal make progress and develop some speed, we have worked on a number of projects. For instance, we worked on loans with ESG-linked features, as it will be able to apply either amortized cost or fair value of other comprehensive income, depending on the business model. We've actively participated and working with the ISB on accommodating power purchase agreements. I mean, there's a huge potential on regenerative energy, but it has to be exploited. And to exploit it, of course, we do need a lot of investment money. And here a standard is needed that enables those companies to do this without too much sort of volatility in their financial records. And finally, also, we have had intense discussions with European so-called transmission system operators, TSOs. Those are the ones that provide the capacity of the grid to transmit electricity from, for instance, the North Sea to other parts in Europe. And they also have the problem right now that they invest heavily, billions of euros today, but the benefit from these investments does not come right away, but only in next year or maybe even more than 1 year later. And they also are not happy with the current standards that do not allow them to really bring the real value of their investment or show the real value of the investments right now. The fact is that, in fact, their business model is a very safe one. Whenever they invest, they do know that they will finally create a lot of revenue with it, but it is not clearly be seen. So here is a need for standards. Everybody's in agreement, and we are confident, I should say, that maybe next year we can have already start an endorsement project. At least the industry is eager to see this happening. Now, I mentioned early on that we live in challenging times. And when I talk to you as a German citizen, you can imagine that I also have in mind the challenge that we face in Germany right now, minority government, new elections 90 days from now, and a very unsecure future, so to speak. We are not the only country. I mean, take France. 90 days, and Michel Barnier had to quit. And so our neighboring country also does not have, well, it has just a government that's continuing the work, but it's not been elected. So two major countries in the European Union are right now not really capable of taking necessary and important decisions. This is a political crisis. We are also losing increasingly competitiveness. Our industry is. The statistics show it. companies that do invest, either they don't invest, or if they do invest, they preferably invest outside of the European Union, be it USA or other promising markets. Now, the economic growth potential is hampered by the policies, likely policies that we can expect from incoming President Trump. He has already announced that he will introduce tariffs. He will insist on local manufacturing. He will give up regulation in the oil and gas sector. Drill, baby, drill is his statement of fracking for the gas. And also, he is seriously considering to eliminate the ESG criterion for loans in the financial sector. Now, if all of this happens, that may have consequences and we have to somehow react to this. We will later have a fireplace discussion with the Vice President of the Legal Affairs Committee of the European Parliament. We may ask her the question, how do you prepare to react to these decisions by the US administration if it really will be and become a reality? The role of the public sector to finance necessary investments in infrastructure and ecological transformation is limited, increasingly limited to the already high, or you could even say excessive, public debt in many countries, and to stagnating or even decreasing tax income. The public sector in Europe has reached 50% or more, in some cases even 55 or 56% of GDP. Empirically, we do know that 40 to 45% is the ideal. So 50% already is high. 55 is far too high. And of course, the market, irrespective of what the central banks decide on the interest rate, the markets are no longer willing to finance those sovereigns at those interest levels. And the private sector, of course, is the one that will have to come to the rescue. Because if the public sector cannot sell their sovereigns anymore, and they cannot afford to. I mean, the low interest that we had for many years is gone, and the high interest levels that the capital markets will demand is too high for the countries. They cannot afford that interest burden. They already suffer from a very high interest burden. So the private sector may have to come to the rescue, and the private sector could, banks, insurance companies, etc., they could create money, and they could actually give financing, they could finance it, but they are not willing to do this under the current regulatory burdens. Think of insurance companies, they have to invest so and so many percentage points in sovereigns, and they may not be willing to do this anymore. And the current interest levels they consider are not adequate to assume the risks that they would assume if they finance those projects. So changing the regulatory requirements is rather burdensome in the European Union. I think that the will may exist, but the EU, after all, is a bureaucratic environment, and so changing these rules is difficult and slow. The interest level, in my opinion, will no longer be determined entirely by the central banks. It will be defined by the capital markets. And the QE, the quantitative easing that we've seen for so many years, is no longer a viable answer. We now see in retrospect what the QE policy has produced. Inflation and very high public debt, because it was fairly cheap to raise money. And unfortunately, that money that has been raised was not invested all the time the right way. It was in many ways raised to finance presents for voters. So we'll see what the future will hold. Through discussions with the banking regulators and other stakeholders, particularly from the banking and insurance sector, EFRAG is contributing to the ISB's effort to introduce a dynamic risk model that better reflects dynamic interest rate risk management, dynamic management of rate risks. And the rate risk is there and is increasing by financial institutions. I think, therefore, the DIM model is a very important one. So far, it is designed to become a tool for the banking sector, but we do know from discussions with the insurance sector that the insurance industry is also interested in such a model. And so the step 2 may be to modify it, adapt it to also fit the insurance industry in the future. Thank you very much.
So we'll have now an ISB perspective on the financial reporting developments. So I ask Andreas Barkov, the ISB chair, to join me. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, Benoit, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me first take the opportunity and thank EFRAG really for this invitation to share some remarks with you as to how we are advancing transparency and have been advancing transparency. So a little flashback. If you turn the wheel back 20 years, there was not a single jurisdiction that applied IFRS accounting standards. 20 years ago. Now we are close to 150. So the widespread adoption of IFRS accounting standards ushered in a new era of transparency in corporate reporting. And the pivotal moment obviously was driven by Europe, which took the important step of mandating the adoption of IFRS accounting standards for listed companies across its member states. But it wasn't just the European Union. Australia, Hong Kong, New Zealand, South Africa also became early adopters, and there are many others that have joined since, reinforcing the momentum. Today, as I said, we have close to 150 jurisdictions in 20 years. 150 jurisdictions that require or allow the use of IFRS accounting standards for all or most publicly listed companies. This underscores the global recognition and demand for consistent, high-quality financial reporting standards. While accounting standards alone do not ensure competitiveness, they lay the foundation for businesses to compete more effectively in the global economy. And this morning, Director Merlin talked about financial reporting being the bedrock, and I completely agree with that comment. Transparency has been central to this, and today it is worth reflecting on our progress and shared challenges that we, together with our stakeholders, must navigate. Transparency creates trust in financial markets. Let me show how we are advancing both through our purpose and our work. Our mission is to bring transparency, accountability, and efficiency to global financial markets. We serve the public interest by fostering trust and financial stability within the global economy. The global acceptance of IFRS accounting standards as a common language for financial reporting across borders demonstrates this trust in action. Let me highlight concrete examples from this past year that demonstrate how this common language translates into real-world benefits. And again, Director Merlin has already touched on one, which is the significant milestone that we've reached this year with the publication of IFRS 18 on presentation and disclosures in financial statements. This standard represents the most significant change in the way financial performance is reported since IFRS accounting standards were introduced. IFRS 18 introduces 3 sets of requirements to improve companies' reporting of financial performance. First, companies will use consistent and improved structure in their income statement with defined categories and subtotals, thus making comparisons easier for investors. Second, IFRS 18 will also enhance transparency of what we call management-defined performance measures, a subset of otherwise called alternative performance measures. And third, it requires more useful grouping of information in the financial statements. These improvements will give investors better information about companies' financial performance and consistent anchor points for their analysis. But our commitment to transparency also extends to ensuring that existing standards continue to meet their objectives, and this is why we conduct post-implementation reviews. This year, we've concluded 2 PIRs of 2 major standards, one on the impairment requirements relating to financial instruments in IFRS 9, and the other on the revenue standard in IFRS 15. These reviews confirmed that both standards are providing investors with useful information. This real-world validation helps us ensure that our standards are providing transparent and trustworthy information in today's unpredictable economic environment. Transparency and trust must be coupled with a deep understanding of diverse economic realities and priorities. Our global reach means that we need to be cognizant of the diverse stakeholder needs across economies with vastly different conditions. Different jurisdictions and regions are at various stages of economic development and will naturally have different priorities. While our mission to help investors to make good capital allocation decisions receives universal agreement, the practical reality can look very different depending on where you're from. For example, some jurisdictions may be grappling with geopolitical and economic security, and we've just heard that, while others want to prioritize technological innovation and drive growth. These diverse economic realities influence how accounting standards are implemented and are understood. In this context, European perspectives on financial reporting are undoubtedly important, but they represent just one part of the global landscape. We have to recognize and respect diversity and ensure that all voices are heard. This brings me to a fundamental principle of our work. To be truly effective as a global standard setter, we must consider the full spectrum of views that we receive, while remaining sensitive to local and regional issues. This does not mean that we can or we should address every priority, but it does mean we need a transparent and structured approach to problem solving. We put this principle into practice through our open and inclusive process by actively engaging with stakeholders around the globe. Our project on intangibles illustrates this approach. Whilst everyone agrees that the current accounting for intangibles needs improvement, stakeholders have widely differing and divergent views on both what the problem is and how to solve that problem. This challenge is amplified by the rapid pace of change in today's business world, where more and more companies find that traditional reporting paradigms do not faithfully reflect their business models, particularly when it comes to intangible value drivers. This makes our task both complex and urgent. Any solution we proposed must be robust and practical across different business models and jurisdictions. This is why we are approaching the intangibles project through extensive stakeholder consultation. First, by clearly identifying the problems that need solving, and then by understanding how we should stage our work to timely deliver improvements to the market. Agenda setting and how we plan with purpose, embedding our understanding of stakeholder needs into the longer-term planning. One of the most frequent questions I receive is how we decide what makes it onto our work plan and what doesn't. As we approach our next cycle of agenda consultation, this question takes on even greater significance. Our agenda setting process is open and consultative. We publish our criteria and seek input and clearly communicate our decisions. This transparent and exclusive process allows all stakeholders to have a voice in shaping our direction, even if we cannot address every concern due to the need to balance diverse and sometimes competing demands. In our last agenda consultation, we applied specific criteria to evaluate potential projects, focusing on both impact and practicality. At its core, the selection process prioritizes investor needs while ensuring the efficient use of resources. Through this process, investors identified 3 high-priority projects that we are addressing: improving the reporting of climate-related uncertainties in financial reporting, starting a research project to review the requirements for the statement of cash flows in IFRS accounting standards, and, as I mentioned earlier, examining the accounting for intangibles. While these projects received strong investor support, not every project on our agenda requires strong investor support to be prioritized, and let me make that clear. Nor can our agenda address every stakeholder's concern. The challenge lies in making choices that maximize impact while respecting resource constraints. We must also carefully consider the cost of change, because changes to our standards affect companies globally and have to be borne by those that did request the change and those that have never asked for it. Balancing the need for improvement against the importance of stability sets a high hurdle for any new project. As we prepare for our next agenda consultation, these considerations will continue to guide our work. As we reflect on the progress we have made together and the steps we are taking to address current challenges, it is also time to turn our attention to the future of financial reporting itself. Increasingly, our profession is being asked if traditional financial reporting has lost its relevance. My answer to that question is an emphatic no, and you probably wouldn't have asked any different. Traditional financial reporting remains at the center of the corporate reporting universe, and I'm glad that actually the director, Merlin, has made the very same comment this morning. Offering a consistent and reliable lens into a company's financial position and performance. Financial statements serve as anchors in financial and corporate reporting, providing crucial context and grounding. Investors need this information to assess future cash flows and to hold management to account. At the same time, the growing emphasis on connectivity is reshaping how we view the purpose and scope of financial reporting. Traditionally, financial statements were considered the central hub, with all other information connecting back to them. So it's a one-way street. Today, this perspective is evolving to recognize the importance of connecting financial statements to other forms of general purpose financial reporting, such as sustainability disclosures, and to provide a more holistic picture of a company's activities. Financial statements do have their limitations, and we must be realistic about what they can and cannot do. Financial statements follow agreed upon concepts, principles, and conventions. They are designed to capture the present and document the past, but not to predict the future. This boundary ensures consistency and reliability, but also limits the scope of what financial statements can provide. These limitations contribute to what I call an expectation gap. While investors and other stakeholders increasingly seek forward-looking information, financial statements alone cannot address every question they have. This is where connectivity becomes vital by providing meaningful links between the different types of information, such as sustainability and other narrative reporting. When these different types of reporting are effectively connected, investors gain a more holistic picture and a clearer understanding of how various risks and opportunities interlink and how a company's current position relates to its future prospects. However, we must be mindful that this bridge cannot be built by simply changing accounting requirements or by overloading financial reports with excessive complexity. The boundaries of the financial statements exist for a purpose. While transparency is crucial, it is not a cure for all the problems we face. Making information visible does not solve the underlying challenges. Reporting on climate risk is a case in point. Transparency alone around how companies are affected by and contributing to climate change will not change whether we will have a habitable planet to live on. But it is an important prerequisite for decision makers to take informed actions. The path forward lies in recognizing that effective reporting requires a clear understanding of the purpose of each report. The traditional financial statements remain our foundation for understanding a company's resilience, its ability to weather challenges, and its capacity for growth, but other forms of reporting can expand our perspective. Success lies not in choosing between traditional and new forms of reporting, but in understanding how they complement and connect to each other. When information flows seamlessly between different types of reporting, we can build a holistic picture of corporate performance and prospects. So it is important to acknowledge that even then, not every question will have an answer. Let me close. Our role is to ensure that financial reporting continues to meet the needs of an ever-changing world while respecting the diverse global context in which we operate. Our success in advancing global financial reporting standards has always been built on shared understanding and common purpose. To meet the challenges ahead, I would argue that transparency should be combined with vigilance to identify emerging issues, adaptability to address them effectively, and inclusivity to reflect the breadth of perspective that shape our global financial ecosystem. By staying true to our foundational purposes, but also evolving to meet new demands, financial reporting can continue to build trust and support global capital markets. I'm confident that by working together, we can achieve that. I'm pleased that we will explore different perspectives on financial reporting in our panel session to follow. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to continued dialogue on these important issues.
So we'll have our first panel, advancing further financial reporting. So the introduction will be done by Sébastien Rouchimana. Sébastien Rouchimana is our financial reporting tech chair. He has been, before that, managing director of PricewaterhouseCoopers Belgium, plus, of course, a very long experience before that. Please, Sébastien.
Ladies and gentlemen, well, my speech actually has been covered by previous speakers, so I have nothing to say. I'm going to say something, though, for a response for those who think that financial reporting is no longer relevant. I know so many everywhere on the social media and other platforms, they argue that financial reporting through its accounting language is an art that narrate the past and therefore is irrelevant. I don't think this is whilst some of it could be true, I don't think it is a correct characterization of financial reporting. So I'm just going to rebut that assumption with simple examples. Recently, we got from our financial institution constituents some call that some of their new products, that loan products that were charging the cost of borrowing based on the action and the behavior of the borrower, that applying existing requirements led to an accounting treatment that was deemed to be unreasonable. And the ISB took on board this issue, and together with EFRAG, we had about 3 proposals, and we came up with a proposal that suited everyone. So that is a concrete example where financial reporting is relevant, where financial reporting proves to be evolving to a changing world and to respond to the big questions of the time. With these amendments, EFRAG has just recently sent the endorsement advice, and I heard from colleagues from the European Commission that the actual endorsement is imminent. So this will allow these products to flourish and help the funding of our climate change and our Green Deal. Another example is on the power purchase agreements that my honourable friend Wolf Kleins mentioned earlier. I mean, what's the problem? CEO of 11 multinational European companies came to us and said, we have earmarked investments in billions to invest into the green energy, renewable energy, but we cannot proceed because our accountants, our CFO says it would lead to unacceptable volatility in the income statement. Surely that cannot be the case. But we asked why? Because we went to talk to energy producers. They said, we actually, for us to invest into the North Sea and invest into the desert somewhere in Sahara, in North Africa, and invest billions in these solar panels and bring that energy to Europe, we need to make sure that we have some sort of certainty that our investments will deliver. And hence, we seek that our customers, companies that sign up to these agreements, commit to a longer period, 15 to 20 years. But if you do that with a fixed price, and given that this fixed price will remain fixed for the next 15, 20 years, regardless of the changes of the spot prices on the market, current requirements makes those contracts derivatives effectively, fair value through P&L, unacceptable for CEOs. The ISB took on the challenge and undertook the fast pace amendments. And we are on course, ladies and gentlemen, to having final amendments before Christmas. I hope I'm not spoiling, Mr. Chairman. So we have convened all of you, all of our EFRAG members, and indeed EFRA board members. I've said to them, no one is going for Christmas until they report to us on the 20th, because we need that vote. If we miss the vote, Europe will not be able to apply the amendments in 2025. So this is another example where financial reporting is so relevant to responding to the big questions of the moment. I could go on and on. I mean, come on, ladies and gentlemen. Rate regulated. What have we heard? The TSOs came to us. These are the transmission energy transmitters, that organizations that Wolf referred to earlier. They said to us, we are about to raise funding to invest into grids, into infrastructure that will take that energy from the solar panels somewhere in the desert and from the windmills somewhere in North Sea to the grids in Germany, in France, in the Netherlands, in Norway, in Sweden. But to do that, we need to raise funding. And when we go to the markets say, well, if we look at your credit rating, you need to really pay high, so high interest rates. And they argue our balance sheet could be better if you took into account what we are entitled under the rate regulated activity in our jurisdictions. The credit rating agency said, no, we cannot take into account an asset that is not permissible by an existing standard. The ISB took on board that challenge, and they went on and worked hard together with us. They've promised, I hope, Mr. Chairman, I'm not putting pressure on you, to deliver by the second half of next year the final standard. And together with the European Commission, we have a plan to fast track that standard, which will be IFRS 20, I hope, to make sure that it is endorsed as soon as possible and allow our companies to invest in renewable energy. And I mean, we had a call recently from the Eurogroup and the European Commission on burden reduction. What the ISB has done, they've just issued IFRS 19 to reduce that burden for subsidiary without public accountability. I mean, that is another example of where financial reporting is relevant. But I can go on and on, but I think we'll get even much more insights if we hear from our panel as to how financial reporting evolves and adapts to a changing world. And I have the pleasure and honor to invite my honorable friend, Jens Berger, who is my vice chair of the EFRAG, and he's a partner at Deloitte. And Jens will moderate the panel, and he will introduce the experts we have. And quite frankly, earlier, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned about our diversity. And so I'm glad for a change. We will have experts, women, on the floor, because I've seen just men parading one after one. It is embarrassing. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Sebastian, for the kind introduction. At least we have expert women here. Not sure about the men, but anyway. Yes, I'm very honored. Thank you to host this panel here today with an exquisite number of people representing different perspectives today on the very important topic of advancing financial reporting and moving it into the future and making it stay relevant. And I think Andreas made a valid point on saying that financial reporting is still relevant and it will stay relevant. Before we start, let me briefly introduce the panelists in alphabetical order. I'll start with Andreas Barco. Has been introduced already, so I'll be quick on that one. He's the chair of the IASB in London. He has a PhD in economics, and he's also worked for a large cooperative bank before moving into leading the technical department at a Big Four firm. Then he got invited to chair the German Standard Setter as the president, and obviously did something right because the trustees trusted him to become the chair of the IASB. Next in line is Ann Lommers. Ann Lommers is the head of risk and business assurance, as the new title is called, and the corporate chief accountant of ASML, one of the largest manufacturers of semiconductors in the world. And she has started her career at PwC, working there for 10 years in assurance and transaction services. And then she joined ASML, and you're also a chartered accountant, as far as I remember. Welcome, Anne. The next in line is Małgorzata Matuzovic. She is a partner at EY in their IFRS desk. She's also responsible for the CESA region in terms of sustainability reporting. And she graduated from Warsaw School of Economics in 2004, and then started joining EY. And working the ranks up to partner level from there. And her focal points are financial audit, treasury advisory, financial instruments accounting, surprisingly, as many others do, who are successful. And she's also a trainer and facilitator at various conferences, and also active in the local accountancy bodies in Poland. She's been a member of EFRAG Tech since April 21, I think. So good to have you here. And the last panelist I'll introduce is Serge Patin. He told me that his introduction should be he's born an analyst, so he is. There you go. He spent most of his life as an analyst, but what is also important here is he has been always active in standard setting. He has been a EFRAG Tech member. He has been the vice chair of the Financial Reporting Board, supporting both in keeping the crowd under control and deliver on the agenda. But he's also, and I think that's important, I think education is at the core of what he's doing. So all the things he thinks about, and financial analysis plus accounting, he tries to multiply, if you wish. And he is lecturing at Fabelfan Academy, at FS, Kluwer, Brugge Business School, and KMO Campus, as far as I understand. And he's also writing on bookkeeping, accounting, and IFRS. So thank you, Serge, for joining today. The topic of today is advancing further financial reporting. And as we've said, now that we talk a lot about sustainability reporting, there's a challenge with, keeping the attraction on financial reporting. But as we have heard today, it's still relevant and it still needs to adapt to what is happening in the world. And I think that is important. And I think that given the number of projects and the number of tech meetings and additional tech meetings, thank you, Chair, we have to do to get votes and to endorse standards, to comment on standards, to produce, to further our own agenda, tells you that financial reporting is still very relevant. So I think we'll cut that panel in three pieces. It's the past, the present, and the future. And I think we'll start a bit with the past. Andreas, you have alluded to you responding to changes, to business models, to transactions, to situations. When we look at the world 20 years ago, when IFRS was mainly introduced in Europe, business has evolved transactions have changed. So in the past, how did the ISB respond to those changes in circumstances, and how did it adapt to further financial reporting?
Thanks, Jens. Thank you, Jens. And thank you for associating me with the past on this panel. That's a great start. So I could go even back in time and connect to something that Wolf said. Actually, when we started accounting, actually, we were lucky enough that there was probably one accounting change applied to the law every 30 years. We are now lucky if we don't have a month where not something is happening. So obviously a big change. Well, times at that time, 20 years ago, were obviously a bit calmer. There were crises somewhere around the globe, but they didn't manifest them all the time. And the pace was arguably different. So if you go back 20 years in time, I think we clearly had a solid manufacturing sector. Services were on the rise, but if you think about what's driving today's world in terms of new technologies, AI, cloud computing, all of that didn't really exist. And I think that has contributed to two things. One is pace of change, and the other is magnitude of change. And I think if you want to respond to that, it becomes quite challenging, even as a national standard setter, but even more so as a regional group or as an international standard setter, because as I alluded to, not everybody is at the same state of affairs of development in their own country. There are different practices, there are different cultures, there are different languages being spoken. To just accomplish that and actually get a full picture of how prevalent is an issue on the global scale, is it pertinent, is it significant enough for us to take action, or can we actually wait for another couple of years before we actually get to do something, is really the most challenging bit. I would say in the past, the IASB has done its part through agenda consultations, as I alluded to. Every 5 years, we are mandated to go to market and tap the stakeholder base and ask them about, are we still doing the right things? Is there anything that we should be stopping that currently sits on our agenda? Is there something that we need to add to that? And apart from setting standards, is there anything else that you want us to do, like stakeholder engagement, like going out, like connecting with our sister board, for instance? So that has been done, I would say, in the last 15 years and hasn't really changed that much. The one bit that I had brought in when I became chair 3.5 years ago is I installed a program that I call Horizon Scanning. It's good enough that you probably tap the market every 5 years, but we know that things may occur in between. Power purchase agreements was one thing that already was alluded to. Pollutant pricing mechanisms are now on the fore. Cryptocurrencies make the headlines, but still not headlines in the accounts, thank God. So there may be things that are ebb and flow, and obviously we want to keep an eye on that so that we don't get to topics when the house is on fire and then frantically searching, oh, where have I left the bucket with the water? But ideally addressing an issue before actually the fire is coming out. So it is challenging and it has been challenging, but I think the key challenges is pace and magnitude.
Thank you, Andreas, and thank you for the gentle nudge around the past. So I think we swiftly move into the future and the present, actually. So we have seen a tsunami of recent crisis developments, changes in geopolitical factors that always had some implications on financial reporting. Andreas, you have said that there's constraints on your resource and your resource base, but also what is the priority. But I think on current issues, and maybe that's the first question to Małgorzata, is what should be on the ISB's urgent to-do list for the next month/years?
Good morning, everyone. Well, I think there is a number of issues the ISB could consider, and many of them are already on your agenda or watch list. So I think we know you mentioned a lot of these issues already. To me, I think the main area to address is the standards that are quite old, right? Like IS 7 statement of cash flows, and in particular IS 38 intangible assets, which both I think date back to around 2001, I think, right? On intangibles, take software, for instance, right? The way software developers deliver their products to their customers has changed significantly. We are now dealing with complex IT architecture, with complex implementation infrastructure, accounting for cloud computing, edge computing, agile software development is very complex. And the thing is, most costs, which are typically most expenditures, which are typically very material for companies, which relate to software as a service software, right? They are often expensed under current accounting framework, which by many constituents, many stakeholders, is considered, let's say, disputable or counterintuitive, right? And the issue of expensing versus capitalizing is a major issue when it comes to intangibles accounting. And it does not only impact the balance sheet, right? Because it also impacts EBITDA. Expensing, for example, software costs impacts EBITDA, whereas capitalizing them does not. And whether we like it or not, EBITDA remains a key performance indicator for many investors and preparers across all industries. Though to me, it may not be that well suited for, many knowledge-based or let's say less capital-intensive industries. Anyway, I think that advancing financial reporting extends beyond a standard setting. To me, it also covers improving quality of financial statements, enhancing the reporting process and timing of the reports, complementing financial statements with other information and overall connectivity within the annual report, leveraging using of new technologies like AI for data capturing, analysis, processing, and finally, also ensuring that the standards and the financial statements are understandable. So this links to me to the need for ongoing education and upskilling because of the increasing complexity we see. And I hope we will have a chance to elaborate on that later on.
Thank you, Małgorzata. You mentioned EBITDA as being still a key performance indicator, and I think that's an excellent opportunity to get you in, Serge, because you see it's been told that investors are looking at EBITDA. What's your response on that?
We can't discuss EBITDA because we only have an hour. But I would like to link it to something else. It's profitability. From a user perspective, analysis perspective, I'm a pretty fundamentalist. You need to create value, so you need to be profitable. And profitability means you need two numbers, a numerator and a denominator. And what Małgorzata is saying is actually correct. Does it make sense to deduct certain CapEx from the numerator and not add it back to your denominator, invested capital? Or should we look at it differently? And I think I agree with her. We should look at it differently. By accident, I had an interview, meetings with ISB people yesterday on intangibles, and then the question was, should we reconsider what we allow to be capitalized? And the answer is, of course, yes, because as Bob Dylan already sang it, the times they are changing. New products, new services are there, and we need to take that into account. Does it mean that the standards were wrong until now? No, absolutely not. It's simply that companies, people, preparers, or whoever invent new things, and we need to reconsider how we account for them. We did the same exercise many years ago when we analyzed leases. I mean, we all agree that if you have something that you can use for a while, well, just expense the rental cost, charge it to P&L, that's it. And then all of a sudden we discovered that comparability was an issue, and we also discovered that a lot of entities had lots of financial contractual obligations, and we wondered, shouldn't we recognize that as financial liabilities? And then we created IFRS 16. So it's fine if you, as Andreas said, stay in touch with the market, see what people are doing, and adjust your standards whenever needed. So perfect.
Thank you, Serge. Małgorzata already spelled out her wish list. Andreas told us what they have on their agenda. As a preparer, how can you live with that wish list plus existing projects?
Yeah, I think my most favorite frame is less is more. So I actually went back, you know, 20 years ago, there were like maybe 20 pages, and every year I saw pages added to the annual report. And I looked at it yesterday, and we have about 350 pages, and 50 pages is financial reporting. And 300 pages is something else. So I do agree with what Andrew said, the complexity and the magnitude, but it's not only financial reporting. You know, when you try to tell a story, to the outside world, it's not only financials, but it's also non-financials, and both have to be connected. And I think there comes the difficulty into play. At least when I started, I could, you know, take my laptop, be in one room, and write an annual report. Those days are over. I need about 250 people to help me write the annual report. So over those years, also the capability have increased significantly. So looking at this audience, I know that these are almost unique species and very wanted, because there is a war for talent in order to get those people that all understand the accounting, but also understand the non-financial reporting about it, because it should be connected. And I think over those 20 years, what I've been seeing, the primary statements are still there. Accounting principle guidance is also still there, but the disclosures have increased significantly. And I think our challenge is, even if you look for one number, I'm going to take the revenue recognition standard as an example. If you look at the amount of disclosures you need, that one figure might cost 3 or 4 weeks to get that done. So I think it's not only about the what we do, but also the how. And we do want to increase comparability, which I think is important for every user, what we have, but also the amount of effort that you need to get it done, that should be in balance. And with the pace currently, regulators are issuing reporting or laws and regulations in order to get it done, becomes much more challenging in order to get that done. Also because if you look at the systems that need to provide these data, of the controls that you need to implement in order to get it done, that's a lot. So it's not only getting that one number into your annual report, but you also want a thorough internal control framework in order to support that. So I think over those 20 years, a lot of things have changed. Yes, business models have changed, complexity have changed, but also the user has changed as well. It's not only looking from an investor perspective, but also more other stakeholders are there. And also the capability we need. So the how, the people that we need in order to get it done. And something else, I think, which has become much more important, and I'm happy to see also at EFRAG that's done really well, is the dialogue. It's not only about regulators or about auditors or users or preparers, but it's the magic happens when all four come together. And I think that's, I'm looking for more magic into the future.
Very peculiar definition of magic, but anyway, I'll appreciate that as an technical accountant. Andreas, you have said that you receive a lot of requests on changing standards, and often actually by preparers, but also by others. How do you deal with that, balancing that off against, you know, Anne's call for less complexity?
So I completely agree with her. Less would be more. We could apply a principle 1 in 2 out, and I wonder whether we would ever agree which ones go out, right? We may not agree on which go in, but we probably don't agree on which go out. The problem is inherently that those that do have an issue want to see their issue addressed, and all the others couldn't care less. The problem is we can't have 150 variations of one standard. That throws away global comparability in the first place. So the case about standardization is really to provide for a common denominator that creates least havoc. It will never go without havoc because there are always some that are impacted. Let me give you 2 examples. Wolf mentioned our project on FIs, financial instruments with characteristics of equity. The reason why we had that standard is because it's very principles-based. People like principles, But some people ask for more precision. So we add precision because we felt that actually there's huge diversity. But we became known of the fact that there's one particular jurisdiction called Canada that went on to IFRSs in the early 2010s and had a consensus view about how that standard should be applied. The problem was that doesn't resonate with where the rest had opined. So if you think about it from a perspective of, is there inconsistent application? From the viewpoint of their jurisdiction, the answer is no. And if you ask their users, are you satisfied with the information they get? They said, yes, we are. The problem is if your mandate is global investors in global capital markets, the answer will differ drastically. So what do you do? The other thing is about identifying the right topics. And I think I said that in other fora. Last year, I had the privilege of going through various countries. I started in Canada, going down to Latin America, then coming to Europe and traveling on to Asia. So I started my talk usually, what's up on your mind? What do you think we should be adding? So Canada said, oh, there's nothing more important than crypto. Yep, okay, got it. So I took that back when we entered into Colombia. And I said, I've just come from Canada. They told me crypto is the issue. No, it's hyperinflation. I said, okay, got it. So I come to Europe, to the European Commission, and said, I've just been to Canada where crypto is mentioned as the topic area, and to Colombia where hyperinflation is the top issue. And they said, no, yeah, it's connectivity. I said, okay, got it. Then I travel on to Asia where people are saying, what's the most important issue? Of course, it's reintroduction of goodwill. So wherever you go, you get a flavor of the month. And everybody wants to see their pet project being addressed. Guys, that's not the way how global standard setting works, unfortunately, right? We have to build somewhere consensus. And you asked me, how do we do that? By being evidence-based. That's the only way we have. That's the way how we can actually refute some calls and say, we acknowledge that this may be an emerging issue. We keep it on the watch list. But as for now, is this really the most important issue? Is this what the issue with the highest sensitivity, where all our efforts should go, where our machines should stop? And if you apply that framework consistently, I think you have a possibility of bringing your stakeholders along, whether they like the answer or not. But if they trust the framework that you apply and bring the evidence and show them the evidence, then I think you have a better case of actually making a call for reducing complexity, or at least not adding complexity.
Thank you, Andreas. Can I keep you on for a second, because you have just started to allude into the next topic, effectively saying, different entities, different jurisdictions have different needs. The other challenge you sometimes face is you take on a project, it takes some while because of the due process, and then suddenly we find out actually the issue is not as big anymore, or never has been that big. How do you leverage that, that need to progress financial reporting and leverage your resources and staying relevant in the current circumstances?
It's not easy. So how do we do it? I think it depends on the type of issues we are facing. So let's take power purchase agreements. That was a very targeted issue. And because it was targeted, because the problem was well identified, it enabled us to actually move very, very swiftly. If we look into something like intangibles that Margareta and Arne mentioned, honestly, it is a nightmare. I mean, for the benefit of the audience, every year we convene national standard setters from around the world in London to host a conference. And this year, actually, we had Slido polls on how would you address the issues around intangibles accounting. What do you think should be addressed? And what do you think we should not address? And we gave standard setters a list of 30 topics that usually come to mind when you think about intangibles. Believe it or not, the same items appeared top of the list on both items. So capitalize more. Top on the list on the other side, don't capitalize more. And just it goes that way. I mean, how do you actually ascertain what is the majority view, right? And there's a sound rationale for everything. I can completely understand why people arrive at that position. But to actually now find, is there a majority position? But the problem, I think, roots even deeper. If you look into how many companies are applying IFRS accounting standards, and we've done a thorough statistical exercise over the past 18 months, there are probably around 75,000 companies around the globe. All but about 800 to 1,000 are small and medium-sized. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're interested in. We don't know what their capabilities are because they don't have the means to actually engage with us. And if we don't know who they are, we can't approach them as well. So obviously we can utilize and try to actually embark on the ecosystem, use the audit profession as an intermediate player because they are obviously closer to their clients and can give us an opinion. But sometimes there may also be a difference about how the client itself or how the company itself sees its problem vis-a-vis the intermediator that then reports back into us. But to actually say, is something working or not? We're probably making a lot of brave assumptions when we are developing our accounting standards. And the most evident point is actually when we have to do our cost-benefit analysis. So that's the final hurdle of actually getting the thing over the finishing line and saying, is this standard hopefully bringing an improvement to financial reporting, and is it cost beneficial? The problem is that cost benefit test is always done from the perspective of the biggest companies. And I would hold for one, if you go down one level to a small and medium-sized company, the cost is probably the same relative. But whether the benefit is the same, I will put a big question mark behind that. And that is something that's highly worrying for me. So there's clearly more work to be done, and finding the right starting point, when to start a problem or when to start addressing a problem will always be an issue. Just to put it into perspective, the IASB is itself a small and medium-sized entity, right? We have about 90 people, maybe 80 more, that are working in standard setting, staff and board members. So be reasonable about what you ask, and we already have 20 ongoing projects.
Thank you, Andreas. Serge, and we have touched on, identifying the topics, and if we identify the topics, then what is the best solution, or at least an agreeable solution? You have been in standard setting for quite some while, so maybe what's your perspective on how to circle in that balance and that common denominator?
I don't think that consensus is a wrong word. I'll explain myself. Preparing for today, I was thinking about an interview with Herman Van Rompuy, the former president of the European Council, many years ago, an interview. Of course, he was a big fan of the European project as such. But then he said, are we going too slow? Absolutely. Should we go quicker? Yes. But then he added, that's how it goes in democracies. You talk to each other. You discuss. You agree, you disagree, and you agree that you disagree, and that's how we proceed. So there's nothing wrong with trying to find an agreement. And that's a little bit how I look at the way financial reporting and our corporate reporting is developing. You talk to each other, you agree, you disagree, and you agree that you disagree. There's crises and every now and then, there are challenges ahead. Yes, absolutely, but you discuss and you try to come to a consensus. There's nothing wrong with the word consensus. A few weeks ago, somebody told me that consensus was wrong because you only have losers. I disagree with that. I would say you only have winners. Depends whether the glass is half full or half empty. And for me, it's most of the time half full. I mean, it was an eye-opener when I joined EFRAG and we had the tech meetings, and we laughed and we cried and we discussed and we shouted. But we tried to find an agreement, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's the ideal way forward. And to make sure that everyone agrees with the framework financial reporting, we absolutely need to find agreements or consensuses. So that's my takeaway. Let's discuss and let's see that we can come to an agreement.
Thank you, Serge. I agree with you. I think we lost a bit the art of consensus. Not only in accounting, but maybe in other parts in the world, in politics and the like. Anyway, Margarete, Andreas has a bit explained the challenges the ISBs facing in, picking the right projects and delivering on those projects. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I would echo the issue of complexity, right? Indeed, the world is becoming more complex, and therefore corporate reporting is becoming more complex and more multidisciplinary, right? We mentioned IT, software, but look at taxes, Pillar 2, for example, right? Look at business combinations, look at financial instruments. They are becoming more and more complicated. Those who are responsible for financial reporting need to capture that. Take sustainability. We need to understand sustainability matters better in order to appropriately reflect them in financial reporting, of course, within the remits of the financial reporting framework, right? On top of that comes increasing workload. We are experiencing the accelerating pace in our lives, right? I think people have less time to digest the content, right? And to respond meaningfully. So I think this is a challenge for the standard setter, right? Who is responsible for navigating the standard setting in order to get feedback which is meaningful and timely, right? So to me, I think there are two approaches which could help. First, I think it's to communicate complex issues as accessible as possible. And I think the snapshots we are producing right now is a good way to address that, right? And the other thing is, I think, is the growing need to strike the balance between complexity of the standard setting and maybe a more simplified approach, which will still be within the remits of the principle-based standard setting. One remark on the principle-based standard setting. I think that with the increasing complexity, it becomes evident that the principle-based standard setting, in contrast to rule-based standard setting, is meaningful and really brings value because it's not feasible to work out rules for any possible transactions, nuances, circumstances, right? And one last remark would be about the due process. I think it's worth to emphasize the value the IFRS Foundation's due process brings, because it may seem to be pretty complex. Sometimes it takes time to complete projects, right? But it is the only way to really capture all the complexities and nuances as you explained. So I think simplifying that would not serve our needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Margareta. One aspect that we should focus on is how users can contribute to standard setting, because we tend to discuss on certain topics. Often they're raised by preparers, by auditors, but actually all this, what we are doing here, at least in financial reporting, is mainly for the users of financial statements. And so, Serge, what's the easiest and best way for you to efficiently get involved in standard setting now, as with the user hat on?
First of all, I often say that the investors are not the primary users of financial statements. I often say that society in general is the primary user. And the notions have already been mentioned a few times this morning: transparency, accountability, financial stability. So I won't come back on that. But indeed, it's difficult to find analysts and other investors to discuss with us how certain standards should be amended or what would be the best way forward. I've talked to a few people and there's a few issues there. Time constraints is one of them. A lot of analysts that are active are not in a position to participate in the EFRAG or the ISB discussions for the simple reason they don't have the time. You can't say there's a capital markets day in Madrid tomorrow, but I can't go and have an EFRAG meeting or an ISB webcast. I mean, it's totally unacceptable. So that is an issue. So you need to find other people that have the time. Another issue is that a user or a real user analyst is not really concerned whether or not the definition of a provision is in line, the current definition is in line with the new conceptual framework. Don't call him on that, he's not interested. I mean, and whether paragraph 38 of IS 16 is in line with paragraph 17 of IS 38, he couldn't care less. But There are, of course, a number of projects that are of extreme interest to the analyst, and a few of them have been mentioned already. The cash flow statement is really a very, very interesting one. IFRS 3 business combinations is always a very interesting one to discuss with users. And the best way forward, I think, to get them involved is to reach out to them. And just to explain what we did many years ago with the post-implementation review of IFRS 3, we tried to find a few business combinations, and we phrased it a little bit and took a few copies from annual report, and we made a case out of it. And we sent those cases out to different analysts that we knew these guys are covering these companies. And then we went to see them and we said, did you see that? Of course, they knew what the business combination was all about, blah, 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 blah. And then we said, did you see this? Did you see that? And then the reaction we got, oh, we didn't know. Oh, we disagree. It shouldn't be like that. I need that information. So we got a lot of input from them, that things with which they disagreed, agreed, would have preferred differently. So I really think it's difficult to get them on board. But really, if you want to talk to users, I would say try to get in touch with them, try to reach out to them with very concrete examples. And I think the cash flow statement would be an ideal exercise. Here are 3 cash flow statements. What do you think about it? So that, I think it's difficult to get them on board, but let's try. Let's keep trying.
Yeah, also let's keep trying with the cash flow statement project, but let's see where it goes. We have touched on that also preparers play an important role, not only in saying, oh, don't go so fast, because oftentimes you ask for being as fast as possible to the standard setter. So what challenges are you facing in terms of progressing the financial reporting to make your financial statements make sense?
So maybe this comment doesn't make me very popular, but financial reporting is very important. But to be honest, there is no financial reporting. It's all about integrated reporting. And it's not a competition, to be honest. We're trying to sell or trying to tell a story to the outside world. And that is indeed my worry. So to give it an example, going a little bit to the afternoon, when we talked about sustainability reporting and the implementation of the CSRD 3 years ago, we didn't have a clue how to do it. And we had a lot of passionate people for the topic, but we also had accountants very knowledgeable in financial reporting that have said, yeah, but I do things in debits and credits. So where are the debits and credits? Yeah, there are no debits and credits. So we had to get a bunch of people together that actually didn't speak the same language. And up to today, I see regulators not speaking the same language. And I think that's the difficulty we're going to get, because as a preparer, I love to say I don't either, but tough luck. At the end of the year, there needs to be an annual report that tells the story to users. And I think that's the biggest challenge we had. How do you educate people? Because also if I look at the school system and I look at master degrees, it's still a sustainability degree or economics degree. Where is that integrated degree? And I think if we don't stop there, if we don't start there, then even if you go into financial reporting up to the complexity we have as it is today, we actually don't have anyone to produce the numbers anymore. And that's the biggest struggle I have. How do you educate people, take them along? So we actually, if I look at my own company, we put the two together. So we actually said we have an accounting expert team, we have a sustainability expert team. I must say both of them looked a little weird when the first time they met. But now, after a couple of years working together, they actually now try to understand each other's language. And it's a great thing to see, because then you see that the non-financial world and the financial world actually comes together. The biggest challenge I do have, because yes, we're one world, unfortunately, we do have different countries, parts of the world. And the biggest fear I have, for example, we do both US GAAP and IFRS, but look at the sustainability report. I have CSRD, I have ISSB, I have TCFD, I have SEC climate change and disclosures. And I all have to do it in basically one report. And then I have to explain to Serge that he also understands and say, chapter 1 is US, chapter 2 is Europe, but it's actually all about climate. that's, I think, the difficulty you have. And then I move to my US GAAP report and say, okay, can you also explain in the impairment testing, what climate change does on the impairment testing? Oh yeah, and US GAAP is a rule and IFRS is a principle. So that's, I think, the challenges we face every day. How can we still make it less complex and so also that a user understands actually what we're trying to tell them? And I think there I need help of all the friends in the table here, how to do that. And I think also the pace. Currently, we're getting Q&As like on a weekly basis. And to be honest, my annual report is almost done. So how do I get all those Q&As? And I do see the stress I think it puts on regulators to get it done. And I really appreciate, I know how much effort it takes, but also things on the ones that still have to read them and try to set up a whole system, including internal controls in order to change that. So for me, it's maybe I don't know what the best time was. Maybe I was still very happy when it's only financial reporting. On the other hand, there are very exciting days coming up to build that connectivity. But for me, indeed, we need to work together. We need to become one world again. And it's also, I think, for regulators, not so, there is a challenge indeed on the topics, but there's also a challenge on how can we speak one language. And I think that's the biggest challenge what we have today, but it's also the biggest challenge going forward.
Thank you, and also in the name of the Connectivity Advisory Panel. So the work is not fruitless. What we're doing. We have now, well, in the true festive spirit, we have now been visited by the ghost of accounting past, ghost of accounting present. So we need to turn to the ghost of accounting future. I don't think accounting will stop. Financial reporting will not stop evolving. It has been evolving for the last hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, actually. Maybe starting with you, Anne, actually, what do you think the future will hold for financial reporting?
Yeah, so being part of the semiconductor industry, artificial intelligence is, let's say, the greatest opportunity probably we have in the next couple of years. But it's also something we need to be conscious of. What does artificial intelligence, what will it bring us? And I actually think it will challenge us on comparability, but also it's going to challenge on the reliability of data. So in OpenAI, you can put all the annual reports in and say, please give me a summary of all the revenues in the last 20 years. But what does then that algorithm actually do? And what will then indeed be the questions to regulators? Oh, I think this is an issue or that it is an issue. And back to your point, we have to go to facts. I think that's going to be a challenge how we use it. I also think it's a great opportunity. Also how we can interpret it, rules and regulations. I think we should not be afraid of that. We try to encourage our people, say, we have a closed AI, just put it in, see what comes out of it. And I think it forms, in most of the time, a great basis for a position paper. But it's also a good basis for a dialogue. And when we talked about annual reporting, we were thinking, we started with this very boring PDF like 20 years ago. And we were brainstorming about what would be the future of our annual report. And you also already see, if you go into the different intranet sites, it's pretty impressive what is actually done with an annual report. But I think actually the future is going to be, and work with me for this, you put on a VR glasses, you walk into the room, you meet the CEO, and you can able to ask them questions, him or her. Then you meet the CFO, and you're also able to ask him or her questions. And then you move into the financial district, and it will show you everything about cash flows. And then you move into the forest, and you will see the sustainability world. And I think actually our users are going to push us to move into that world. But how are we going to do that in terms of regulations, what we have to build that story? And I think something to be conscious. So I think the complexity of bringing those two worlds together, we're going to be faced with. So it's not so much of I'm already happy now if I have everything on paper, and then I try also next year or maybe even the year thereafter have to step into a virtual world. And hopefully, I think all of us can use the opportunity of AI to cope with the challenges that we have today.
Thank you. And this message has not been sponsored by ASML, but Andreas, and also, I mean, we hear a lot of discussions also in sustainability reporting on, structure and, having the information on a structured way. And, having rules and principles and not basically saying, everything is dug out by artificial intelligence. So what's your take on artificial intelligence as the board chair?
It's one thing also that is part of our horizon scanning program. To just let you peek a little bit under the hood, we are actually using AI internally. And you may be shocked. But maybe not. I mean, that maybe explains some of the accounting outcomes. So we don't use it for standard setting, but we use it, for instance, for comment meta analysis, which is really a great tool. Obviously, the flavor matters, and sometimes a certain qualitative statement may be wrongly interpreted. But if you are under pressure and need to digest 300, 400, or in the case of our sister board, 1,500 comment letters within a month, there's no way that any human being could actually process those and classify that in a diligent manner. AI can do that. They can give you the gist, actually, of do people largely agree, don't they agree? What are the areas where there is actually a consensus or largely a consensus? Where are there areas actually where we need to dig deeper? Which helps you greatly to focus your time that is scarce and dig into the issues where really you need to go into and probably push aside those where there seems to be a consensus. Another area where we're using AI is in languages. There are tools that enable us actually to produce our documents in languages other than English. As I said, we are about 80 people. We are not trained linguists, right? We are happy that we do have many, many different nationalities there, but their job is to do technical standard setting and not to write a publication in a foreign language that other people have written in English before. But arguably, if you're then going to, as I did, to Latin America, and you hear that the rate of proficiency of English is less than 5%, it probably tells you a story, right? That we are probably a little bit too colonialistic in our thinking and saying, well, everybody understands and reads English. Well, they may read it, but they may not understand it. So that is certainly something where we use it. But you asked about structure, and that's really about our standards. I would still say that AI is so much more efficient if you put structure to it. Because if you just dump all the information into a big pot and create a chili con carne and ask it, does it taste good or not? And I said, on average, it's not too bad, right? Well, that's not really helpful. It doesn't really tell you anything. But if you say, actually, how to read that data. Is that data financial information? Is it not financial information? Is this something that's long-term? Is there a currency value to it? If you can show dependencies, for instance, between the different things, then arguably the outcome that you're getting will be so much more concise and much better. Whether, given the speed of computing power, we will surpass that area, say, within the next 3-5 years. People currently have different and divergent views, which is why we are monitoring that. And obviously, the accounting taxonomy for us is a very important tool in order to enable digital consumption of our reports. But if it is basically a tool of the past because it is linked to a certain technology that may be surpassed by AI, it would be foolish for us to just ignore that fact, right? We have to actually stay vigilant and actually agile and adapt to it. But if we can help the new technology to become even better, then by all means, let's do that.
Thank you, Andreas. Serge, I will not ask you the questions whether artificial intelligence will get rid of users, but I will ask you the question of how will financial reporting, the way we do it today, still be relevant to you?
I'm perhaps a little bit old school already, but it will remain relevant for the simple reason that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I mean, the financial statements is where all things come together. Business model, strategy, governance, products, services, presence here or there in the world. I know a Belgian company who has been very successful over the past 20 years on a recurring basis. The problem is, over the past 20 years, it has been restructuring all its business units, all its business models, whatever. I don't need to explain what happened with the share price, although what I'm trying to say is in the financial statements, you can't ignore what you have not been doing or what you have been doing. So financial statements are crucial in your analysis, in your views on the company. Now, the question was also, what are the challenges ahead? And there are a few challenges ahead. There's a few projects, Andreas, that are becoming really technical, extremely technical. And I wouldn't say it's a concern, but make sure that statements remain understandable and that the debits and the credits mean something. If a debit or a credit then becomes the summary of a kind of statistical mathematical analysis, whatever, and nobody knows exactly what the number means, that would be a danger for financial reporting going forward. Another one, as a user then, and it's perhaps a little bit of political comment, the information nowadays is everywhere. When I analyzed annual reports, you had the annual report, financial statements, and the strategy and the comments, and that was it. But now there are capital markets days, investors days everywhere in the world. Presentations are launched on the internet every day. Strategy is not summarized in any report. It's on the website. And in the meantime, so the information flow is everywhere. And it becomes a little bit difficult. I mean, transparency is crucial. And it shouldn't be that the right users have the right information available. But that's a very tricky one. I see a lot of companies that announce that they will talk to Morgan Stanley tomorrow. And here's the presentation that we're going to send out, that we're going to give tomorrow morning. That's okay. But I think in reality, the problem is much bigger. And one turn point is, and it refers a little bit to sustainability reporting, I always think about risks and opportunities, but also about the risks. Now, I should have reread the conceptual framework before coming here. But I really think that risk management is probably something to work on going forward, because you can't assess the performance, profitability, EBITDA, if you don't understand the background. What has the company been doing the past couple of years, and how can I link that to each other? So risk management and how that has affected the company is probably also something, I'm not sure, that may need some attention in the coming years.
Thank you, Serge. And very briefly, Margajata, what's your take on the future? Because we're a bit pressed for time.
If so, I will only say that to me, the future belongs to the generative AI. And it will help in many ways for preparers, as Anne explained, for standard setters, for auditors. I can imagine real-time audit, for example, for users, for data analysis and structure.